After being given the opportunity to experience Paper Mario the Thousand Year Door, I've been curious about something. The nature of shadows. These purple beings that don't really get much coverage, but are prevalent throughout the entirety of the game in the form of Mario, the Shadow Sirens, and the Shadow Queen. What are they, really?
It looks like I'm just in time to witness another one of your lectures.
Oh, this is hardly a lecture, Patch. Anyways, perfect timing. I require your assistance.
Oh no, maybe I came at a bad time after all.
Care to repeat that?
Nothing at all. However, may I be of use to you, ma'am?
That's what I thought, you good-for-nothing familiar. Now then, I would like to conduct an experiment, and I require the power of a crystal star in order to do so. Go fetch me one.
A crystal star? You don't actually think they're real, do you?
That's up to you to find out. Now don't make me repeat myself.
May I at least use the crystal star map? I'd be extremely lost without it.
Oh, fine. Well, scurry along, and don't come back without one, or else I'll conjure an army of fuzzies.
You're so cruel to me sometimes.
Now then, let's ramble about shadows, shall we? I'll begin with how they've been defined within the context of the Thousand Year Door, and how that definition could apply to the Shadow Sirens, as they—
Wait, the Shadow Sirens? Aren't they called the Three Shadows these days?
These days, yes, they are. I just simply feel like calling them the Shadow Sirens today, however.
But they're the Three Shadows, Mistress Nova.
Using Duplass's definition of a shadow is someone who has had their name and body taken from them. It's not just a matter of copying their appearance like a typical dupligos of his species is capable of doing, but rather something much more specific. That's not all though. To truly become the victim, they must be erased, thus becoming replaced and completing the process. When someone becomes a shadow, they take on the form of a purple silhouette incapable of speaking their own name. Attempting to do so will result in nothing coming out. Now, let's look at two other cases of shadows and see how they compare. We have the Shadow Sirens first, who are much more visually distinct than Shadow Mario. Why is that the case though? If we apply the rules of a shadow to the Shadow Sirens, then this means that at some point, all three of them had to have had their identities stolen, leaving them as purple shadows. It may be possible that those who become shadows and are unable to get their original identities back have to start over again and create new ones, especially if their original bodies become lost or destroyed. It could also explain why they wear more visually distinct attire such as traditional witch hats, gloves, and potentially even wigs. All of which don't seem to blend into their silhouettes like they do for Shadow Mario. But wouldn't this be immediately contradicted by the fact that they're still around after all these years? After all, Duplass had to actually kill Mario before he could truly become him. Otherwise, there's a good chance that his magic curse would have worn off, or remained incomplete. However, this could only apply to how he, in particular, steals bodies, since this came as a result of his own ability. There are many scenarios that could happen to someone that may render them without a body, only leaving behind a shadow of themselves in the end. It doesn't just end there, though. The Shadow Sirens also differ in the name department. If they really were the same shadow that Mario became, they shouldn't be capable of speaking their own name. However, there is a single instance of this happening in-game. Beldam proves that she can say her own name, and when she can do so, it's safe to assume that Marilyn and Vivian can also do the same. This further supports the likelihood of them being different from Shadow Mario in that regard. I also found it peculiar how unfazed Vivian is by the fact that another shadow that isn't one of her sisters or the Shadow Queen is talking to her, which makes me wonder if her species is more common in the world of Mario than we think. The mayor, along with the residents of Twilight Town, mostly seem neutral towards them as well. With a tinge of subtle hostility, the mayor finds Shadow Mario's presence problematic. And a local resident interestingly suggests that he should spiff up like the real deal. A mere jest? Or a slight implication that he's capable of being dressed up despite his lack of a form? The sirens are probably quite familiar with shadows like the residents of Twilight Town. What's new to us could be completely normal to them. Especially so in the latter's case, thanks to Duplessis's shenanigans. And while the shadow sirens may be something of a deviation, they may also not be the only ones. Maybe there's even an entire town of shadows somewhere out there, living about peacefully as outcasts. Beldam does speak of a home to return to after Mario's first fight with them, but it's not like it's ever been made clear where exactly that home is. Still, with all of this in mind, where does this leave us? As for the most likely explanation as to why the Shadow Sirens differ from Shadow Mario, judging by what we can see by their differences alone, it's likely that the Shadow Sirens are simply a different variant of Shadows, much like how enemy variants exist throughout the Paper Mario series. They may have been born as Shadows, only really sharing the physical similarities of them as far as their similarities to victims of body swapping are concerned. After all, not only do they have gloves, but they're capable of blushing, have visible mouths, can say their own name, and can hide by vanishing into the ground. It could still be possible that something happened to their original bodies and names, and that what we see of them isn't truly what once was, but the likelihood just isn't there in my opinion. I do think, however, that there is a much stronger case of this to be made with the next character related to all of this. The Shadow Queen herself. The Queen of all Shadows. It was always puzzling to me just how vague the Shadow Queen's origins are. You mean to say that one day, she just decided to come out of nowhere and wage war on an entire city? Either the historians who documented this are missing context, or she truly was always like this from the start, and is just innately evil, given her demonic moniker. I'll be entertaining the former possibility, however, since I find it more fun to speculate on. I don't think either possibility is greater than the other, though, unlike the case with the Shadow Sirens. Before I go on, I'd like to mention the hidden message from the Palace of Shadows, and the changes made between the GameCube and the Nintendo Switch versions. Master of Shadow and Dark, stones have power of stars. Complete all 7, so that we, the Great Ones, can live again by the stone. We know the stars spurn us, and that the skies lie, but the stars bring balance. The star up in the heavens shone, carrying the lore of the sky, carrying secrets from on high, by skill and might, engraved in stone. Stones to rival the celestial spheres, the 7 hewn by a fell hand, feared far and wide across the land. Master of Shadow, Queen of Fear. Never doing that again. Anyways, I would have to assume that the Switch version is being more faithful to the Japanese script, but the GameCube version seems to hint that these scriptures were written by shadows of a higher status, in the form of a prayer of sorts, hoping that someday the stars that reject them will give them the balance they long for through the crystal stars. This reminds me of something of an allegory, with these shadows being a metaphor for fallen angels who wish to be allowed back into the heavens again, with the stars representing the heavens that the crystal stars are imbued with. Fallen angels may not be devils, but they are treated like and seen as demons, which will tie back into something important later on. Trust me. The Switch version instead changes this to what seems like acknowledging the Shadow Queen's achievement in forming the 7 crystal stars as a mark of her terrifying might. These messages are always open to interpretation, but I thought it was interesting to mention nonetheless. Now, what reason could I have for questioning these historians? The simple fact that the Shadow Queen is, well, a shadow. She isn't like Shadow Mario or the Shadow Sirens. She's different in her own right. which makes me wonder how it is that she came to be. Is it possible that she, too, is a victim of having her identity stolen? While the idea falls apart when applied to the Shadow Sirens, I think it stands more firmly when applied to the Shadow Queen and how she operates. Entertain this thought for a moment. Perhaps she wanted revenge against the world for losing everything beyond her identity, and wanted to make them feel the same pain that she felt. It's said how she sent her minions out to take land and treasure from all around the world, which I would have to wager was a direct order from her. The key idea here is that she wants to take from others, much like how Dupless took from you your identity. They called her a demon, much like Dupless was called a monster, despite nobody knowing who he really was. They only knew of a monster out there that was turning the citizens of Twilight Town into pigs. They feared him for his actions, very much like the Shadow Queen. And like the Shadow Queen, you, the player, get to understand through becoming a shadow what it feels like to have everything stolen from you through the loss of your identity. Your partners, your reputation, and your status. You became a blank slate with nothing but a purple, blobby form to show for it. Could it be possible too that much like how you encountered Vivian and teamed up with her, the Queen found servants in the form of the Sirens, who also could have shared in her struggles? Or did the Shadow Queen create them, resulting in the trio of shadows who lacked the traits seen in Shadow Mario? Where Mario was left with nothing but shadowy forms of his hammers and boots, they may have been blessed with names, elemental powers, and purple bodies that take after the Queen's very own. We may never know, but if she did create them, it would explain why they seem to be exceptions to the rules on how shadows work, exhibiting traits like saying their own names. And maybe I'm just reaching for parallels here, but I find it all fascinating to think about. Unlike the Sirens too, the Shadow Queen seems more bothered by her status as a shadow, being much more pleased when presented with a vessel in the form of a beautiful woman that she can possess. It makes me wonder if shadows of her caliber are capable of possessing bodies that they deem fit. After all, if you are without a body or name, then what stops one from possessing another body and name altogether? Could Shadow Mario have done this? I'll end off with one more thing, though. The source of it all. Why is Dupless capable of stealing identities to begin with? It's possible that he's had a history of doing this to others given how experienced he seems to be with this ability. Certain dialogue from him seems to imply this as well, as if stealing bodies is something of a prankish side hobby of his that he's been experimenting with. I've narrowed this down to 4 possible reasons that I'll go into. 1. This is a power unique to Twilight Town. 2. Any duplicos is capable of this power as long as they keep their own identity unknown. 3. This power was given to him by the Crystal Star. And 4. Dupless is simply unique in the same way your partners are. With the first point of this being a power unique to Twilight Town, I think there's a slight chance of this being likely. Something I've always found odd about Twilight Town is the way you enter it. It's not a detail that gets talked about much, but you need to have your name written down somewhere on you in order to get through the Rogueport underground pipe that connects it to Twilight Town. This detail might be connected to Dupless's ability to steal an identity, given how the name and body would both physically be there. But again, slight chance. There's nothing in the game that really supports this idea beyond the mere existence of the prerequisite. With the second point of this being something any Duplighost can do, I don't really buy into it. Duplighosts in Paper Mario 64 were known to only be capable of mimicking Mario's partners, but they can also mimic Mario himself, as well as his friends. None of them ever display the ability to outright steal a body. The point of this was built around the idea that in order to steal an identity, the user has to keep their own identity obscure, as in, the more people who know who they are, the less likely the body stealing trick is to work. I came to this conclusion through Dupless freaking out the way he does once Mario figures out his true name. The fact that he went out of his way via hiding his pet from revealing his true name is a peculiar detail that hints at some sort of weakness or flaw that he's trying to cover up for. However, duplighosts are pretty generic. They don't really have unique identities like Dupliss, because they're meant to be standard enemies. Dupliss is the exception, not the norm. Otherwise, they should all be capable of stealing bodies, but they likely can't. With the third point of the crystal star, this could likely be the case, as there is an instance where the ruby star is shown undoing the body swap that was performed on Mario. If the crystal star was able to do this, it could be implied that it played some vital role in Dupliss's magic, and by extension, his pig transformation curse. This would be a rare instance of the crystal stars being used to enhance one's abilities, or self, with a similar case occurring with the previous chapter's boss, Grubba. And lastly with point 4, Dupliss being a unique case. Paper Mario establishes quite often how partners deviate from their standard Mario enemy equivalent. Not every Goomba can tattle like Goombario or Goombella can. Not every Koopa can pull off the stylish spins that Koops can. And much like I've discussed earlier, Shadows also seem to deviate amongst themselves, following their own respective rules. It's possible that Dupliss's body steal is a secondary ability unique to him, just like his very appearance, as he isn't like other duplighosts. It's also possible that he just doesn't bother stealing bodies again after Chapter 4, because he's a sore loser who's already accepted the likelihood that everybody knows his name by now. Normally, this is where the rambling would end. However, I came across a realization recently that I believe is worth exploring, and could very well present another, more deep-rooted truth to the nature of shadows. What am I talking about, you may be wondering? For this final section of the video, I'll be addressing the underexplored lore of Super Paper Mario's Tribe of the Ancients, as well as how their inventions of pixels just may be linked to shadows, and by extension, the Shadow Queen. Now, I will warn you, there is quite a bit to cover here, so I'll try my best to make this information as digestible as possible, in the form of a visual timeline that you can follow. I'll assume you've already played the game, or at least have an idea of the story, as there will obviously be spoilers and character mentions. We'll be starting from the furthest point in time chronologically. After all, I believe it's important for us to be on the same page before delving into speculation and theories, which I'll be addressing afterwards. Before I begin though, I also have to say this. Super Paper Mario's lore is a strangely inconsistent, confusing mess due to many different factors. The English localization, the vague nature of the Tribe of the Ancients, as well as their story being lost to time, and the way events are said to play out within those stories. A lot of details are based around in-game rumors, but I think the English localization of the game made changes to the Japanese scripts that make certain details even less clear. I'll get into them as we go along, but know that while I'll mainly be sourcing the English script, I will from time to time be referencing some of the Japanese differences, as I think they make certain details much more clear, especially in regards to the Tribe of Darkness. With all of that out of the way, let's see how all of this ties back into the potential origins of shadows, and what exactly they are. The Tribe of the Ancients was a highly intelligent group which consisted of those that either studied or specialized in the art of magic. Within that group were notably the Four Sages, the Tribe of Darkness, and a master magician who took on apprentices. The Ancients, however, were limited by their lack of physical prowess, which led to the creation of pixels as a means of circumventing that weakness. The Four Sages each specialized at a specific talent. Merlite specialized in worlds and dimensions, leading to the creation of Flipside. Merlu specialized in dimensions, is said to have the power to see future visions, and is a partial creator in the Light Prognosticus. Merlimbus specialized at creating the pure hearts. and Merlumina was said to be the wisest of them all, and a leader to her people, and is a partial creator of the light prognosticus. The tribe of darkness consisted of powerful magi who saw their magic as something to use for an important thing that was never explained. They distanced themselves from humans in order to preserve the strength of their magic, and forbade any form of marriage or love with anyone outside of their tribe. There was an unnamed magician among the tribe of the ancients, who had a wife, daughter, and son. The wife and son died in an accident, however rumors say that the son survived. The daughter was said to have died from an illness, but was then revived by her father into the Pixel Queen, the very first pixel ever conceived, by using her human soul and placing it in a special type of vessel. With that background information out of the way, let's finally talk about that timeline. Pixels were created 3,000 years ago prior to the events of Super Paper Mario by the ancient magician using the Dark Prognosticus in order to circumvent the physical limits of his kind. The first one ever created was the Pixel Queen, who was created using the soul of a human. 2,000 years ago, the Pixel Queen rebelled against the ancients by commanding the pixels, who were being used as intelligent tools by the ancients, to advance their civilization. The magician's apprentices who inhabited the original 12 pixels went and rebelled against the queen, with only one survivor remaining in the end. They lost their pixel via a last-effort sacrifice in an attempt to stop the queen. The Pixel Queen's ability seems to be that of creating illusions, while the pixel that failed her could see the truth. Finding out that the queen was created by the magician using the soul of their deceased daughter via the Dark Prognosticus, the survivor took off with the book and disappeared. The tribe of darkness also eventually splintered off from the tribe of the ancients, and it is rumored that they isolated themselves in a castle deep within a forest. 1,500 years ago, the Light Prognosticus was created to counteract the Dark Prognosticus. Around this time, too, the tribe of the ancients were roaming around different worlds, entrusting the pure hearts created by Merlimbus to others such as King Croacus I and Queen Scorpina the 14th. God forbid I ever have to pronounce that again. Fractale was constructed around this time for the same purpose, to be a guardian for the pure heart. Not only was Fractale created though, but by extension, its prototype, Ractale, who was locked away in Flipside's Pit of 100 Trials, which was designed to study the power of the pure hearts. Flopside's Pit of 100 Trials, by extension, was created in order to study the power of shadows. 1,000 years ago, the Shadow Queen waged war on the world, sinking the original city that existed before Rogueport underground, and making a quarter of it her den, as her minions and servants, likely including the Shadow Sirens, would steal and plunder, filling it up with treasures and riches and turning it into a rich palace. She is stopped by the 4 heroes of legend, and has her soul sealed away within the deepest part of the Palace of Shadows, via the Crystal Stars. Going into the history of Count Bleck and Tippy for a moment, due to Tippy's original form being that of a human's, it's likely that her banishment from the world, an eventual unconscious state, as well as her short time together with Count Bleck, and transformation into a pixel, all occurred much closer to the present day, which would imply that the Tribe of Darkness was only recently killed off. It was never stated when exactly Count Bleck lost Timpani, or when he went berserk and killed off the rest of his tribe by destroying his world, but this very well could correlate with the statement made about the tribe disappearing one day without a trace. And finally, we have the present day, which is just the day Count Bleck initiates his plan to spawn the Chaos Heart. Pretty self-explanatory.
Woohoo!
Get out of here. I wasn't kidding when I said that there was a bit to cover. However, we're only just getting started. So, what can we extract from this information? Let's start from the heart of the matter with Count Bleck and the Tribe of Darkness. In Super Paper Mario, there are 2 NPCs that you can pay 10 coins to for stories on the lore of the game. Their names are Garson and Carson. Carson tells you about Flipside's lore, and the more surface level details like pixels, the ancients, while Carson tells you about Flopsides, as well as the history of the Tribe of Darkness, as well as Count Bleck and members of his group. It's from Carson that we learn some details in regards to the magician who created the original 12 pixels, as well as the Pixel Queen. It's through Carson that we learn that apparently the magician's son survived the accident that was thought to have taken him and his mother. A point was raised in questioning what became of the magician's bloodline, when there technically would have been a successor who inherited his blood, and it's been theorized by fans that this descendant could very well be Count Black. However, there's an issue with that theory. How can Count Black be a descendant of the magician's son if the magician had human children? That would contradict the rules of the Tribe of Darkness. Not only would that imply that either he or his wife are human, but that any future children would also be human as well, tainting that powerful pure magic of the Tribe of Darkness. It could be possible that Dementio is his descendant as well, given that he is a magician. However, he certainly doesn't look human by any stretch of the imagination, and compared to the other descendants of the Tribe of Darkness, he definitely stands out as an anomaly. Still, it could be possible that there is a connection, for another reason that I'll get into later. For now, let's talk more about the Tribe of Darkness. It was never said that the apprentice, who disappeared with the Dark Prognosticus after defeating the Pixel Queen, was a member of the Tribe of Darkness, and yet they were said to have stolen the book and disappeared. The same was said of the Tribe of Darkness as well. What is going on there? Perhaps the surviving apprentice was a member and informed the rest of their tribe. Perhaps the Tribe of Darkness only associated with the rest of the Tribe of the Ancients for the self-serving purpose of stealing their techniques and knowledge, waiting for the perfect opportunity to ditch them all at some point. There's no true certain answer, but let's say that this was the case. How would that knowledge serve them? It always did seem like they had a personal agenda of their own to fulfill. It could be possible that the Tribe of Darkness is the very same who wrote that engraving we see in the Palace of Shadow Tower. It could be possible that they were all worshippers of the Shadow Queen, and that she was who the tribe saw their magic as something worth using and preserving for. Perhaps, maybe they were trying to revive someone lost to them, or trying to revive some goddess that they worshipped, using the power of shadows. Interestingly enough, for a single instance in all of Super Paper Mario, Count Black projects the magic circle pedestal seen in the Thousand-Year Door. It appears when he's capturing everyone in Bowser's castle to gather finishing touches for his staged wedding plan, and then never again. A reused asset, or perhaps a connective tissue. Given the four heroes of old designed the seal around the door, it's possible that they were simply working off of a familiar design based around the crystal stars that they saw, created by those who served under the Shadow Queen. And all of that comes back to my theory that the magic circle is really just emblematic of the Tribe of Darkness itself, almost like a symbol that represents everything that they stand for. It's important to remember that the crystal stars were forged by the Shadow Queen herself, and are only really intended to extend her powerful influence across the world, using the essence of the heavens. They aren't pure in nature like the purity hearts that precede them, which was created using the power of love. They're artificial by comparison. And maybe the Shadow Queen required a good 500-year nap after the Tribe of Darkness revived her before her powers would be fully restored. Maybe. But as mere speculation, why would I assume that the Tribe of Darkness were masters of the power of shadows? Well, ominous tribe names aside, while we know that the Tribe of the Ancients specialized in things like dimensions and love, it was never specified what exactly the Tribe of Darkness was good at. Only that they were some of the best magic users around within the tribe. Given certain statements in regards to the creation of Flipside and Flopside, I've speculated that the Tribe of Darkness mainly specialized in the power of shadows, contributing their mastery over the art to the creation of Flopside, and in collaboration with Merlite, who specialized in world creation. The power of shadows is likely the counterpart of the power of love, which is what the Tribe of the Ancients strongly pursued. The Tribe of Darkness likely specialized more at stronger magic as a result of their devotion to the power of shadows, which they would be much more knowledgeable at. However, because they saw their magic as something to be used for something important, it's possible that the reason that they didn't want to mix with humans is because their control over darkness would be tainted by the purity of a human heart. It could also be possible that the only reason they stuck around with the Tribe of the Ancients was to learn from them in order to further their own specific goal. I can't help but to suspect they had greater plans in mind, despite how long they must have been associated with the tribe of the Ancients, until their inevitable betrayal. I do believe it's important to clarify, however, that due to how absolute Count Bleck's father was in his plea towards his son to not open the Dark Prognosticus, I believe that the Tribe of Darkness had no intention of ever using the book. There is still a possibility that they did truly mean to keep it out of the hands of others, or that they were saving it for something much, or rather, someone much grander. This is also what I was referring to in regards to the vague nature of the lore surrounding the game. We can only make guesses and assumptions based off of what we're told, so try not to take too much of what I'm saying as anything concrete. With that in mind, another theory I've had leads us into talking about the biggest mystery of the entire game, Shadow. Or rather, as it's named in Japanese, Shadow.
You owe me an explanation.
No, not that Shadow.
I don't believe you.
But for the sake of avoiding confusion, I'll stick with Shadow. Shadow is the true, secret, hidden final boss of Super Paper Mario. Not much is known about it, or what it actually even is, beyond what you see of it through its fight and dialogue. It's been highly theorized by fans that Shadow is actually just the Pixel Queen herself, based on its dialogue about wanting revenge on the Ancients, and being created by them. However, if the timeline from earlier was any indicator of anything, I don't really subscribe to the idea. I'll get into why soon enough though, just indulge me. Now, something I'm unsure of that will likely always remain a mystery is, if Ragtail and Fractail were created by the Ancients in response to the Dark Prognosticus being stolen, with the sole purpose of guarding a pure heart long after the Pixel Queen's rebellion, then what exactly is powering them? And by extension, what fuels Shadow? The Ancients were known to have grown fearful of pixels after the Queen's rebellion, and production of pixels came to an end. Another point worth bringing up is how the magician's pupils went on to develop techniques to create even more pixels based on the original 12. If the Tribe of Darkness broke off from the Tribe of the Ancients, I also can't help but wonder if they too suffered from growing too reliant on pixels. Maybe their reason for disappearing with the book is related to what happened with the events of the Pixel Queen. Not only did they need to consider preserving their future, but they couldn't let themselves grow complacent alongside the others who had relied on the pixels for so long. Something I think is worth keeping in mind though, is that with their disappearance also meant the newly gained knowledge of the idea of pixel making. What if the Tribe of Darkness went off on their own to experiment with the idea of creating pixels using their own magic, deviating from the magician's method of using a human soul? Assuming their powers are related to shadows, it could mean that their experiments were based around trying to control a vessel filled with this dark magic of theirs. Maybe this perfected concept resulted in the birth of shadows as a unique race, with Shadow being an almost failed artificial deviation created by the Ancients, as more of a defensive measure that never worked out due to its defiance. Basically, what I'm getting at here is that in this instance, Shadow might be a flawed version of whatever the Tribe of Darkness could have achieved with a much greater understanding of shadows. The Ancients had repeated the mistakes of the Magician by creating entities who could not only think for themselves, but could rebel against them much like the Pixel Queen. And much like the pixels whom they hoped would serve them, they likely wanted these creations to serve as their potential guardians for their pure hearts, never respecting their rights to deserving a free will of their own. This wouldn't paint the Tribe of the Ancients in a very positive light, given how obsessed with love they all were. Still, I think we can dig a little deeper. In order to find potential answers, we must ask potential questions. Let's address what exactly Shadow's powers are. Really, what are they? We can only judge based on the short interactions it has with the party, as well as the abilities it displays. From that, we can theorize. It seems to have the ability to create clones of anyone and anything with enough preparation time. These clones all seem to act independently, but could also be following a general command from it. These clones take the form of a black shadow, and are much more powerful than their authentic counterpart. The confusion lies, however, with the shadow copies it creates from Mario's party. Not only can it speak through them as if it's possessing them, but it seems to feel the same damage that they take, given its staggering words after defeat. Has it truly been defeated though? That's not all it can do, however. Assuming that it is the Pixel Queen, that would mean it also has the power to create illusions as a means of disabling someone. We never see this ability used on Mario and the others though. It could be because Shadow really is unrelated, or because it came to the conclusion during the long trial that they'd be too powerful to succumb to its trickeries. Given how we're never exposed to its true form, and only have a single gesture in the form of a camera shutter from it, as well as its speaking with the unique computer text style used by very few characters too, what does all of this say about its existence? Now this is purely conjecture. However, the name Pixel could relate to what Shadow and the Pixel Queen are. Given that the latter was the first Pixel ever conceived, he could have been a prototype that was created using a mechanical body as a vessel before other, more specific constructs were used. By sheer coincidence, Tiptron bears a resemblance to this exact idea, as a mechanical imitation of Tippy. Fractale, Ractale, and maybe even Mimi could all be based on this concept too. Something else I wonder is, if Shadow was the Pixel Queen, why couldn't it command Mario's pixels to leave him like the Pixel Queen could, for the pixels that were being worked like slaves? Why did it feel compelled to have to replace him and his parties as the heroes? Perhaps it lost the ability to as a result of the ancients limiting its power of pixels. That might explain why it thought the next best option would be claiming their pixels instead. Another aspect I find interesting is how both Dimentio and the Pixel Queen are both masters of illusions, as well as how Shadow and Dupless are both capable of taking on a shadow form by seemingly just watching their opponents, being required to kill them in order to replace them. It could all be coincidental, but at the same time, there's not a lot I can extract from mere similarities. I thought at one point that perhaps Dimentio was the son of the unnamed magician, and that the power of illusions is what tied him and the Pixel Queen, who would be his sister hypothetically, but I think that this is beyond reaches. No, the Pixel Queen can't actually be Shadow. It just doesn't make sense. The Pixel Queen's power is the ability to inflict illusions on others. Shadow's ability is creating shadows based on copies of others that it watches closely for a long period of time. One was created by the magician using the soul of a human, while the other was created by the ancients. Those are the facts presented to us by the game. Given the way that Shadow speaks too, it's why I feel that Shadow's true identity likely resembles something closer to whatever Fractale and Ractale are. However, due to the cursed nature of its power, it was sealed away and left to its own devices, much like Ractale. However, whereas Ractale accepted its fate, Shadow seemed to have had other ideas. Given that the Pit of 100 Trials was a test site to study the power of shadows, something must have gone horribly wrong to the point of Shadow becoming difficult to control for the ancients, leading to them sealing it away before another massacre could break out. If a pixel can be defined as a soul being contained to a specific kind of vessel with a purpose, could a shadow be what happens when you try to do the opposite? A shadow is one who has been robbed of their name and body. They are the remains of a soul. They are formless. So what does this say about shadows? Possibly that they're wrathful souls who are self-serving and self-removed from any semblance of love. They would be the opposite, embodying the more chaotic power that comes from giving into more negative emotions. Those that can be found in vices, such as the 7 deadly sins. This does fairly line up with characters like Beldam, the Shadow Queen, and even the distant, more closed-off nature of the Tribe of Darkness. Shadows, at least I think, essentially are just wrathful ghosts with the ability to possess other bodies, successfully doing so depending on how strong the will of the person is. I believe that this is even supported by Shadow taking on the form of Mr. L, rather than Luigi too. Mr. L is the subconscious part of Luigi, the very shadow to Luigi that stemmed from always living in his brother's shadows. This would be more apparent in him than the rest of the heroes, lending to his appearance shifting through Shadow's analysis. I can't help but wonder if Shadow would have been easier to control for the ancients, if the Tribe of Darkness was still around to contribute to its creation. Still, it's not like this would mean all shadows are bad. Marilyn is mostly indifferent, Vivian is the most kind-hearted example there is, and they're nowhere near as wicked as their big sister, or the Shadow Queen. It's also important to consider how this plays into the other heroes. Shadow retains Peach and Bowser's forms, as well as Mario's, but Mario keeps his body shape even when Duplo stole his identity. I think this speaks to their pure hearts and minds, being much harder to break through compared to Luigi, who was easily controlled via hypnosis, as well as brainwashing. Conversely, look at Peach. She was able to fight the powerful Shadow Queen's exertion over her will. Still, even with all of this, a lot remains unknown. I strongly believe that Intelligent Systems had a reoccurring theme going on here while developing the Paper Mario franchise, with the idea of light and shadow, and how the two come together in contrast. I can't be certain that the shadows of Thousand Year Door are connected to the shadows of Super Paper Mario, or if even the Duplo ghosts of 64 may just be ghostly shadows themselves, with Shadow displaying an artificially optimal expansion of their abilities. Who knows? Maybe Intelligent Systems will give us that Super Paper Mario remake, and maybe they'll try to play around with further connecting the lore. What a dream come true that would be, no? Regardless of what the truth may be, I hope that this analysis of the topic has shone a light on the matter for you. With that, my analysis is done. If you've managed to watch through everything, I hope I've given you something to at least think about the next time you open up a Paper Mario game. And thank you for your time. The world of Paper Mario is fascinating, with a lot of charming characters and worlds with their own little strange themes and messages waiting to be learned from. Shadows easily have to be one of the most fascinating aspects of the series as a whole, and I think that it's neat that Thousand Year Door builds on 64's Duplo Ghosts by introducing one with such bizarre abilities too. Ah yes, shadows. Such mysterious little entities.
You know, now that I think about it, you look a lot like a shadow, Mistress Nova.
Yes, and...
Ah, are you a shadow?
Would you like to find out?
On second thought, no. I'm okay with never knowing.
Good boy. Now, I believe I told you to fetch me a crystal star earlier. Where is it?
Right here, ma'am.
Wow, you actually found it.
It wasn't easy, you know. I had to crawl and stretch through some dark tunnels in order to—
I didn't ask.
So what are you going to use it for?
Oh, this.
What's going on? Wait.
I see. These stars really do pack a punch. Neat. If you've come this far, thank you for watching. Truly. I'll see you next time. Maybe.